has more to lose in my view.
All right, welcome back and good morning. In case you're just joining us, you're watching Morning Prime. We continue informing you about the latest news covered on today's dailies. Just evaluating Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, the big story being more tax pain in budget plan. Equally, the Daily Nation has gone big with that particular story. Salaried Kenyans to pay more taxes, where we have categories of the winners and the losers. Workers earning over 500,000, the payees up to 35%, salaried persons to pay 3% housing fund. Those are some of the losers in those proposals, but the winners, businesses and consumers, annual inflation adjustment has been repealed. Business 16% VAT exemption on exported services, and LPG and fertilizers have a 16% VAT exemption. So the winners and the losers in those proposals. And right before the break, we were deliberating with my panelists, Joseph Kioko, Martins Owino, and Kevin Osido. Osido, it was your turn. Even as you respond, perhaps talk to us about that editorial cartoon as well.
Thank you, Jesse. The editorial cartoon of the Daily Nation, in my view, more or less speaks more to its headline.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, what we see there is a gentleman who looks like the president rolling out the finance bill with spikes, as you rightfully said earlier on. And the man in a suit that looks like mine, looks like that highly salaried individual. But he's telling them, I'm mboga, and that with your bananas and your tomatoes, I may not be able to buy them. And if I have to, so that like the throwing of hands indicates like you can walk away with your tomatoes, I don't need them. Or else let's have a conversation around how you feed your child, who is also seated there, by lowering the cost of the tomatoes and the bananas. For example, today a tomato is sold at 3 for 20 shillings. And so if you tax this gentleman higher or highly, then it means that I may not be able to give you the 20 shillings. So I can as well do without your tomatoes. And I imagine that is the throwing of hands. But it's also indicative of a tired individual saying, like, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, which is almost like telling government, we have seen you passing, things you want for your own good. Sure. So you can go ahead and have your way. But of course, having people have their say. But in addition to that, in the earlier conversation, I think for me, the challenge with the government is the communication aspects at two levels. One, during the campaigns, the president told Kenyans that the cost of living is high because of the handshake. And that people who are not part of government came and overtook government, and they were doing things in a manner in which they wanted to do them. Now, he will have to be forced, given these proposals, to get back to the people and tell them that indeed what we thought is really not what it is. It was never about the handshake, but the reality on the ground, as we took our ground are right now, is that we want to tax you more, or this bracket of professionals or individuals, because we have to ensure that you have roads, that healthcare is working, etc., etc., so that we stop throwing the blames, which I think is what the government during the campaigns was doing. Number two, it would be very critical for government to begin to speak from one platform. The economic advisor to the president comes and says things are not working because of this, and this is the reality. But if you listen to other government officers, they are not seemingly speaking from the same tongue and tone. So I think that government communication from a perspective that excites and interests citizens, particularly from a mechanism that will be able to have citizens have trust and belief in government, will ensure that there is some bit of increased level of honesty, and that government has to boost that confidence in individuals by being truthful. Number three, and I think we have talked about this, remember that now we have two levels of government. We have national government and we also have county governments. The government will have to engage, that is national government, very candidly with county governments. At the level of the county assemblies, they also pass laws, and some of those laws are taxation laws. Now, there has to be a very clear linkage between what the tax law at the national level and the tax law at the county level, despite the fact that the functions are totally different. But of course, in as much as the functions are still different, we continue to see national government invading in functions, some of the functions that are supposed to be done by county governments. For example, in health. So you have county governments doing health financing facility laws at the county level, but you get to the national level, there is a policy on health that does not favor the law that the county assemblies are passing, which therefore means that even when you walk to health facilities, depending on the level of facility that you're going to walk into to get your services, you may not get those services because there is actually a lacuna in both policy and also the law.
Okay.
Number 4, national government and its white elephants. Why do we continue to see the president and some senior high-level governments relaunching projects and programs that were already launched many years ago? I think that there has to be a very clear mechanism of auditing government projects, especially mega projects that had been budgeted for, against what we see in the budget proposals. Because otherwise we'll be doing double budgeting or assuming that Kenyans are so stupid not to go back to the past and read. And there are so many projects that we can be able to attach to those kind of fallacies and the bits of confusion. So I think that the government through Treasury, and I'm sure that within Treasury there is an M&D and audit department or agency, let them get out there and walk to all the corners of Kenya and ask themselves, what projects did government want to do or budget to do in 2013, 2017? Were they achieved or not? Which ones were done halfway, quarterway, or fully done? Which ones were moved over to 2017, 2022? And then how can we now sift them off the budget and save that money and use it for something else? Because I think that sometimes the people who do the budget, these budgets, assume that Kenyans are not very critical to want to go deeper into details. So I think that if we can be able to fix those mechanisms, we'll be able to save some resources that might be able to help save the kind of budget that we are seeking to do, because that is actually the proposal that I intend to submit to the Parliamentary Budget Committee on during public participation. But much more fundamentally, counties also need to be helped to be able to strengthen their own source revenue mechanisms. We have not seen a lot of counties, pushing themselves to bring out the best in them.
All right.
Each county in this country almost has the capacity to put in place an industry. Why is it so difficult for us to have conversations between national government and county government on county industrialization? You go to Kisii, for example, the soapstone. You go to Murang'a here and their milk. You go to Kisumu, Siaya, the lake region, and their fish industry. Why is it so difficult for us to have mechanisms of engagement between national government and county government on economic, what we call the regional economic blocks?
Okay.
I think that was the intention, to be able to spur counties, but also pushing them to help save the budget by enhancing and strengthening own source revenue mechanisms.
Interesting. And he's talked about counties. Even as you respond, talk to us about what we saw. I think the delayed money released to counties was finally released. Good news right there. But we still haven't addressed why money is delayed. Equally, MCAs had a 14-day ultimatum. They will not form the budget in counties if their salaries are not increased.
I mean, first, there's a what Kevin has said here, which is critical, to up the level of conversation. A thorough scrutiny of previous year's budgets. And then, once the gaps are identified, force that discussion into the center of the table. Now, with the handshake, the role of opposition to doing certain scrutinies was suppressed because people were comfortable. I think that's one of the long-term negative effect of the handshake government. Certain things were pushed on that carpet. Now, this parliament that is there needs to play that role effectively. Now, the problem about it is that there's a lot of distraction on the side. You know, when the discussion is about Maandamano, Sava, the IEBC, that's fine. It's healthy. It's good political banter. But the real issue on the person on the ground, he wants to see the issues Kevin has talked about. You made a commitment on this road. How many times are you going to launch this road? Has the MP of this area ever raised this question in Parliament? That this launch was budgeted, money came out, these are the contractors. That road in Bungoma, the Navakolo road, it is known. You just need to pick it out and you bring this conversation. But all these conversations will always be drowned because Monday and Thursday we want to reinstate Cherera. Monday and Thursday, we want to open the server. It's fine. But has wastage been resolved? Are we putting the government on check? We are pursuing the wrong thing. People are pursuing the wrong thing, thinking that they're doing the right. I think that, to me, is the case.
Okay.
In terms of the county challenges, there was a notice, this question of economic zones that Moses Kuria has talked about, not being particularly saying like EPZ, but every county needs to have an economic zone. Yeah? Maybe that spurs the question of county agendas, and if there's substone in Kisii, can you put an economic zone around these economic activities? If the Kambas in Mwala feel that Maembe can make, can you put an economic zone? The fishing industry in Luenya. So maybe that parastatal, if it is well funded and necessary resources are provided, the organization can spur growth from the county level coming up.
Okay.
Certain things can be done. The demand about counties and money, the question you've asked, which the governors gave a notice, it's cash flow management. We had DP Gachagua talk about it. We have no money. The government has no money, and everybody is struggling. Civil servants had not been paid. County disbursement had not happened. It's a cash flow management problem that the government is facing. The government needs a proper communication team that articulates its challenges. The president does well. He is very articulate. Now, the deputy president has challenges because every time he speaks and stands, he reminds us there's a shareholder in this government. There are shareholders in this government. Politics is over. You're the deputy president of Kenya. We are all, by virtue of Article 1, we are all shareholders of this government. Right. Stop reminding us of the politics of you. Stop reminding us of looking behind. Those who didn't vote for you, they exercise their democratic right. Okay. Now they're asking the government, serve us. Irrespective, do not punish me for exercising my democratic right. Now, if effort again would be put in explaining to Kenyans, because this is ni mambo ya kuambiana ukweli. Come to the table, guys. I thought here, the level of problem was only 10%. But when I got in, the level of problem is 110%.
Okay.
These are the shortfalls. Talk to us. I think people want to give, because like Obama said, we are all patriots. We want our country to succeed. Nobody seated here wants Kenya to burn. I think the government owes Kenya honest communication so that everybody plans himself well, even to the leadership of the county. When you delay payment to the county, this is what happens. Local investors who take tenders, who have gone to the banks to get loans, you delay their payment. Then what happens? Because these are commercial loans, this guy gets frustrated, he attaches his ancestral home. Because that was a guarantee for the loan. Then this guy is kicked out. So there is a way in which counties are meant to spur bottom-up growth from the county coming up to the national. We can all compete. When you delay funding the county, you delay a critical element of growth economically for our country. So let's talk. Let's get our priorities right.
Okay, Martins, kindly respond.
There's a Russian journalist who said, if you want to keep somebody in the prison, just make sure he does not know he's in the prison. That's why Kenyans are being enlightened to come out of this captivity. That you think those who are there knows for you, they do for you everything. We have to rise up. The moment we Kenyans come to hold the government accountable in whatever they do, and when I talk of the government, I mean three arms of government. And I want to put this across to Kenyans, that there is no opposition politics in Kenya, according to our 2010 constitution. Hold the parliament responsible. Because we are back now to parliamentary system where there was opposition, we are looking for opposition office, we are doing what? There's nothing like that. We wanted to bring it through BBI, it flopped. And that was the savior. So when Kenyans want to go to opposition politics, let's get back to the constitution amendment mode and do it. So who is responsible for accountability or holding the government accountable here is parliament, period. Now,
let me comment about this cartoon. I know, I know Sita said is a high-class guys. These are middle class. In fact, the economy grows because of middle class. That is what, that's the person being spiked there. If the middle class falls, Mama Mboga will not sell. That's why the border is running away, because he has brought this Mama Mboga to sell and there's nothing. But let me to say this about county government. The constitution says 15%, not after you have collected everything and paid your debt. As you collect, give them 15%. Na hiyo ndio pesa mashinani. And that's why MCAs are also on arms. Because when it lands at the governor's office, it does not trickle well to the wards, depending on the governor. So we want ward refund. Salary, let salary aside, that is their own. But that ward fund is very realistic. That is the money that is going to Anyango, Amina, and Atieno somewhere. Lastly on this one, I want to say one thing here, which is very, very, very dear to my... All this which is happening, in medicine we say, when you want to, when you are doing triaging, stable the patient. Invest in the people first. We call it social protection. And my party leader had a good suggestion, 6,000 per household. That money will come back to the government when the patient is already stabilized. But as we are now, Rogers, you go to Ndewa, the crude death rate are high. Disease burden are high. There's no food on the table. Children are not going to school. And now you say we are raising taxes again in order to stabilize. You are killing the community, you are killing the society. It will not work that way. So invest in the people. You are looking for alternatives, we have them. Invest in the people first. Initiate small industries. And this has been said. Each county has unique whatever. Initiate small industries. Invest there. 75% of the Kenyan population lives in rural areas, so that they don't migrate to Kibera, Mathare to look for jobs. Let's retain them there. They will be more healthy. So that is the way to go, if you ask me.
Interesting. He's given alternatives as well. And Osido, kindly speak about the MCA demands briefly, because it falls under your forte in one way or the other. The demands include reinstatement of plenary allowances, scrapping double taxation on vehicles. They're equally pushing for salary increment, as I mentioned, revoke 30%, pushing for pension, county ward equitable development fund, which is 20% of development budget, financial independence of county assemblies. In terms of these demands, are they realistic to the times we are in? And is issuing a 14-day ultimatum the best route? Because, I mean, this falls under the SRC's office, right?
Sure. The 14 days will elapse. There is nothing that MCAs will do. Because if you look at... yeah, precisely. Because you look at... an MCA in a county, what is your role? What is your function really? Yeah, the much engagement you have with citizens is up to the level of either you go to public participation or they come to your home to ask for food or for money for wedding or to request to put in a WhatsApp group for funeral or whatever contributions, including health. Yeah, beyond that, the citizen down there has very limited engagement with the MCA. But however, the much that they can be able to do is to maybe stifle the legislative role. So that, for example, they have talked about, because they know that the budget process is now going on, and it will be them to actually appropriate the budget, including conducting the public participation meeting. So that's probably where they are also holding someone's balls and saying, within the 14 days, if you fail to do this, then we will not pass the budgets. And we have seen that's a conversation that we have seen.
But will they get salaries if they don't pass the budgets?
What happens is they're actually involved in an advocacy campaign that we want to see it in the budget statement, so that the intention to give us our increments needs to be in the budget, so that if you print the budget, then you will be able to say that MPs will be able to give this to County Public Service Board for MCS salaries. That's really what they're asking for. Because once you have it in the budget, then it means that you'll have to implement it or look for money to put it forward.
Okay.
But otherwise, all the other demands, I don't think make sense. Other than, of course, the increment, which also, given the kind of economic times we are facing right now, is a challenge. But I know, because having conversations with some of these MCAs in their counties, they are also holding the national government, and they are saying, why do you talk about lack of money for the country and you have 50 CSS? And you continue to expand the structure of government? What does that mean to us at the county assembly level?
Yeah.
So this is a conversation that will have to keep taking place against the indicators and proposals of the SRC. Because beyond that, if SRC does not give it a green light, it means that even within the control of budget, it will not pass. So a lot of the conversations, I think part of the issues we have right now as a country is communication. We are not talking to each other, and we are failing to understand each other. But otherwise, all those other demands, double taxation on car loans and all that, I don't think they make sense.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. And before we cross over to you, Kioko, I just want to bring in Martin Zowino. Since we've talked about economy, let's briefly talk about leadership and politics. You've put so much emphasis on Parliament, but if someone was watching the Parliament proceedings yesterday, he would have noted some parliamentarians stormed out of the House, yeah? But what exactly is the issue? And do you feel perhaps, is it an issue on your side as Azimio didn't follow the standing orders when it comes to changing, is it the minority whip, Sabina Shege, from that particular position? Well, what do you make of the ruling of Speaker Moses Wetangula yesterday?
I was one of them who stormed out.
Ah, okay.
Because, you know, Rogers, what should happen in Parliament, even if you are sponsored to be a speaker from one side, you have to be non-partisan. And you have to treat both sides equally. The issue of Sabina Chege, we disagreed because the speaker read in parts. If you go to standing order number 20, must be read together with 20A. Number 20 gives you the threshold you need in order to remove a person from a position. Yeah. In this case, in the minority side. You need signatures, you need the process right, which was good. And that is why the letter was written and attached. When you come to 20A, you are talking about replacement. Even you have taken your car to the garage. You cannot replace before you remove. So we were asking for removal. So the speaker read it in selectively. And that was a problem to all of us. You can't talk of replacement before you remove. And our minority leader asked for removal first. Yeah, and then the speaker's argument won't say, or the standing order says replacement, which is in 20A, which is right, but 20 it's skipped. So there's something we call the law and the spirit of the law. So when you are selective, then it really runs down everybody. Now, the second factor which we have in that house is the majority leader. Whenever he stands to speak, somehow, it's very offensive. I wish he could get to the Bible, which says sometimes silence is wisdom. And he's given more time than anybody else to speak. For next time that others say, no, enough is enough. If you cannot control this guy to make sense, we are going. And that is what happened. But the speaker has no business to reorganize parties. He has, you know, there are two sides. This is the majority and also the minority, which is a coalition of parties. That is the person that the speaker should deal with, not a sideshow on another Jubilee faction and all that. So I think the speaker in this sense, and is a very brilliant speaker, I think he got it wrong. He made a ruling. He cannot challenge it, but we can disagree with it. It was a selective ruling. Once you get a communication from the minority side, who to take out and who to replace, or who to take out only, what the speaker is supposed to do is just to convey. And not to go on a lengthy ruling.
Okay, though you were given a timeline to get your house in order, I believe. Yeah.
I don't. Our house is in order.
It's in order. Okay.
We don't need time. What he would have done in good faith, actually, when the minority leader gave him the letter, what he would have done in good faith, that you want to remove who are we replacing?
Okay.
That question only.
As simple as
and
that.
everything would have been okay.
Okay. Since we're speaking about politics, let's talk about the Jubilee Party. And we saw the front page of Taifa Leo just touching on the push and pull we've seen in the party. Kyoko, I mean, talk to us. Is this the end of Jubilee as we know it? What exactly is happening behind the scenes that it gets to a point that the former president is trying to hold on to this former ruling party?
I think first, since 2002 election, as politics of this country, once the ruling party loses an election, it suffers a natural political death. KANU did, NAC did, PNU did, TNA, URP did, Jubilee is the same. So this is natural.
So UDA should be cautious, yeah?
No, it will.
Okay.
It will. It's the natural progression because our politics are not ideologically driven, but more personality and community driven.
Okay.
Secondly is, it's just bad political manners by the former president, who, having served a role as a symbol of national unity for 10 years, whether we like it or not, a symbol of national unity. Then after those 10 years of service, to decide to want to be a symbol of a sectional, regional instrument, party called Jubilee. It is diminishing the role of former presidents in this country. That when you stand up somewhere, you want to say, I am the leader of Jubilee. It is really bad political manners. And the Constitution of Kenya provided for such eventualities. That, and gave comfort to former president by the Retirement Benefits Act, that you do not suffer financial encumbrances, you do not suffer pecuniary issues. You were treated as a former president. You are, if there's a crisis in Kenya, you are the first person we should go to seek for your mediation. But when you push yourself into a functional, not the entirety of Jubilee, because even within Jubilee there are two functions. So you are leaning on Kioni, not the totality of the party. So those just bad political manners.
But isn't there freedom of association? And equally, when it comes to retiring and your PACs, I mean, if he decides to retire politically 2 years later from where he exits office,
standard and precedents have been set. Moi was the ever-towering chairman of KANU. If he let his party go, even if it went to his son,
fair point.
That's fine.
Okay.
Kibaki was a president for 10 years, did everything, left the country, he left PNU. And he had a beautiful life.
You're right.
There's precedent set. Go to Tanzania. There's precedent. And there's a way that you can do certain things you want to do without having these titles that he's looking for as chairman of Azimio or as a chairman or party leader of Jubilee. They do not confer any political mileage on him as a person. And it doesn't even, you know, politics, there is above the line and below the line. The most effective politics is the one that is below the line.
Okay.
So you don't need this title.
All right.
In terms of what Sabina and the team are doing, it's in politics, as I think Ruto said in Bomas, one day the shoe can be on the opposite side. You know, some of these things, we've lived long enough to be able to see what was happening, you were doing to people 2 years ago, comes back to haunt you.
Okay.
He kicked out people. This party, I remember Morade, the vice chairman of UDA, Jubilee, coming here and say, we'll expel this guy, we'll expel this guy, we will kick out this guy, we will do this. They did everything they did.
So it's full circle right
It's full circle. Finally, it has come back to bite them. In terms of the parliamentary leadership, and I really feel for the Azimio Brigade, really. I think if you are hurt, if your politics, if your body has moved, you cannot be the minority whip of a political grouping that you do not subscribe to. It is totally dishonest. Now, what the speaker did is not a question of if, but when. 30 days is 30 days, it will come. So Sabina should start rearranging her office, removing her personal belongings, settling her financial. She must sort out her personal issues. I think that's the reprieve. That is the reprieve the speaker gave her. You have 30 days to get your house, your personal effects in order.
Okay.
On this other side, since they have accepted you, they also have 30 days to find comfort for you of similar standing. So I think that is it. It's not
Correct.
if, it is when. I could be.
But you see, that's not the role of the speaker.
I know.
To give
I know.
time for an individual to sort out himself. His job is to convey what has been requested of him by the minority leader. And just on it, well, let me just comment. You know, Kibaki, Moi, these were old men. They had had enough. Uhuru is still young. And the presidential retirement package was not supposed to silence them or bribe them to silence. Freedom of association is live and kicking. And also it depends on the subject. The Tanzanians, by nature, are very general. But now if the people you mentored, like Sabina Chege, Kanini Kega, purports to remove you from office, there's that lack of respect, decorum, and process of doing things. I think Uhuru have called the NDC, and you will see what will happen. These are sidekicks, side shows, and I advise them. I think I'm old enough to advise them. When you want to go to the top, climb each branch by branch, and respect the ladder which brought you up, because you may need it when you are going down.
Just in addition to this, three things. One, I think that the legal leadership and constitutional instruments of our political parties are not very strong. For example, one, you will not find the Jubilee Constitution in the open. When you check the website of Jubilee, it is not there. Why? Why should that kind of a thing happen? Because then that instrument should show us the transitionary clause, because it says as the president shall be the party leader. But what happens when you cease to be president, you know? So the constitution is silent, the legal instrument of major political parties in this country. There are lots of gaps in the constitutions or any other instruments, tools that we use. Number two speaks to the issue of ownership of political parties in Kenya. The person who founded Jubilee is a person who will kill it. Anyone who imagines, and the conversation has been that Kenya Kwanza is buying parliamentarians, members of political parties, still goes back to Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. What happens to members of Jubilee who have since crossed to Kenya Kwanza? You know, there is actually a mechanism through which they are supposed to resign, seek for by-election, and then you cross over to another party. We don't see that happening. But largely is the issue of ownership. So you found a political party as a special purpose vehicle to win an election, to become president, or governor, whatever you want to be. But the moment you've done 10 years, like our constitution envisions, so what happens to you? Then the third thing, I think, is also the issues around bringing closure to the 2022 election, which we have continuously seen, even in the Azimio, demonstrations, where Mheshimiwa Jeremiah Kioni will continuously remind people that I'm representing President Uhuru Kenyatta. Why don't we see the president actually being physically present, but is sending somebody to remind us that I am representing? So that conversation around what happened with 2022 elections, what is the state of political parties within Azimio coalition, that's a discussion that I think needs to be finished and totally closed so that we move on to the next election cycle.
But since and I just want to ask a question. Since you brought up the issue of party leaders, should a speaker still hold on to that position, or should it go the same way that Musalia Mudavadi, perhaps the Prime Cabinet Secretary, did, and leave your party leadership, since you're right now in whether it's the executive or the legislative arm of government?
It would be a good practice. But that's why I raised the issue of the gaps, because the constitutions, even for ANC party, for Ford Kenya, for ODM, for CCU, for POA, they are silent on that issue. So they'll continue being party leaders, and that's how they get to be, Prime Cabinet Secretary, because you will be asked, you are the leader of ANC. How many votes are you bringing to the table? That is really the balancing point, the pendulum. So we'll have to have a conversation, and maybe ORPP has to begin beyond just regulating and registering political parties to also building the capacity of political parties to even have an ideology. So what do members of ODM know about ODM in terms of ideology? What does members of UDA know about UDA? Or is it just that Mheshimiwa Musalia Mudavadi ni kiongozi wetu sababu sisi ni waluya? So what? Okay. Then when he becomes Prime Cabinet Secretary, what do I get as a member of, say, the Luya community, who is also a member of ANC party? So I think we need to have a whole conversation around political parties and what they stand for and what they actually speak on behalf of not just the membership of those parties, but largely the citizens, particularly when they transit into government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keko, you had a burning issue.
No. What I want to say is, in terms, one of the challenges we suffer as a country is over legislation.
Yeah.
Everything, whatever we have a problem, we want it tabulated in law. We don't want to develop norms, precedents, culture. This is how we want to be. This is what has been happening. And we must learn from that, because then that becomes part of our society. Now, when you say President Ruto is young, fine, he's young age-wise, but he's very old politically. He's very old. He's retired. So we cannot, bringing a former president to the street because of the right to demonstrate, it shakes the foundations of our institutions in ways and means never seen before. 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, Trump was being charged on a felony issue, former president of America. It hasn't happened over a century of democracy there. And you could see there was tension managing that. Our democracy is still growing. We are trying to nurture institutions to deal with certain things. When the president goes to the Jubilee headquarters, what would happen to a scenario where a former president is tear-gassed? And on what account? Do we have institutions capable enough to deal with such challenges?
He's concerned, but
so now we must let me tell you, we must ask ourselves, is the cost benefit? You want to hold on to what which is not there? So you have served. What are you holding on to that we never gave you as a country? We must get to that point of a conversation. Secondly, Uhuru as a person, fine, former president, as an individual, there are 28 elected members who are saying the position you've taken as a former president, by law you should not be party leader, first and foremost, because that's what Constitution says. And then secondly, us as members, the majority, if one man has one vote, 28 of us are saying the way you are taking us is wrong. Democracy dictates that he accepts that. So these dynamics are not all that. The optics are bad for him.
Okay.
I think the optics are bad for him. Yes, Raila is his candidate, Raila is his leader, but there are effective and better ways of dealing with that relationship. Thirdly, which I'd like to bring to Mheshimiwa here as an elder, one of the challenges that ODM and Azimio suffered is the baggage of President Uhuru. The baggage of President Uhuru. The commitments that Uhuru made to Raila and the failure to deliver on those commitments. Election is over, ODM still feels obligated to fight for Uhuru. If I was in a position of leadership, that's a baggage. You better leave it. It's a baggage that is not helpful to you.
The cons outweigh the pros.
The cons outweigh the pros. It doesn't help Raila's cause. It doesn't help Azimio's cause for constant, because the voter base in Central Province that we anticipated from Uhuru to Raila never reciprocated.
Okay.
These people who carried the kofia, the sufuria, Kioni, his polling station did not give Raila the vote.
All right.
Vote value?
Just we have to talk about bipartisan matters, and I have to give you a right of reply.
That's why they're asking for opening of the server.
No. Rogers, one thing which I like Yoko for, that is personal opinion.
Yeah. Which you can take or leave.
If you subject it to a more enlarged
audience
forum, you may not even get 1%. But Uhuru is not a baggage. Uhuru is an asset to this country, and
to Azimio,
to the country by large. And I want Kyoko to know, yes, age, yes, but freedom of association, yes. And the behavior of a retired president depends on the behavior of a sitting president. You saw Obama came out and campaigned against Trump because of the behaviors. And tear gassing, let me tell you, even a common man should not be tear gassed when demonstrating their rights. And that's the problem we have in this country, that the police officers are not doing what they are taught in training. They're doing what they are told to do. That's why I hope one day we will come and talk about cops. You know, we used to call them cops, community-oriented police. How to partner with citizens and manage that. So in Azimio, we got so many boats from Mount Kenya. It's only that they were stolen. And we always say that every election must be accountable and verifiable. And that verification is in the server.
Anyway, interesting. Let's talk about some of those issues, and perhaps the bipartisan parliamentary team will be canvassing that. Azimio just yesterday, through a debriefing meeting, released a letter, and I'm just looking at some of the issues they highlighted. We want the state to intervene and reduce the cost of basic commodities and services, including food, fuel, electricity, and school fee. We want subsidies that were scrapped to be restored so that Unga can go back to retailing at 100 or less. Number 2, audit of 2022 presidential election results. Number 3, restructuring and reconstitution of IEBC. And number 4, an end to the interference in the management and operations of political parties with a view of co-opting or paralyzing those parties. We heard from the Kenya Kwanza side, the 7-a-side team said they're ready to bend backwards, a sign of political goodwill. But equally, a tweet yesterday from Raila Odinga: we wish to make it absolutely clear that we're not interested in power sharing. In fact, our position remains that Kenya Kwanza is an illegitimate regime that is in power through a civilian coup. We have instructed our team to make this clear. Mosido, I'll start with you on this, because if you're going to the negotiating table, does it work to your favor when you set ultimatums and issue timelines? And speak to something, because Kyoko mentioned something about pursuing wrong interests. Do you feel like we have the wrong interests on the table when it comes to this particular conversation?
Jesse, these are very difficult questions, yes. But I like it because that's really what the context of our country is today.
Yeah.
Now, on the 4 issues that have been outlined by the Azimio La Umoja coalition, I think some of those issues are issues which should not even require a dialogue. I mean, a mechanism to have conversations. So issues around cost of basic commodities is a budget process, is a budget issue. And I think the much that can be done is for Azimio parliamentarians to, on the floor of the House, push government through the minority to majority to outline measures that government has taken. And if possible, because now Kenya Kwanza government has also decided to be seen to be really going against a number of constitutional principles by inviting cabinet secretaries into the floor of the House, other than the committees, let them invite Treasury. And I think they've done this in the past, and several others, including Bwana Moses Kuria, the Trade and Industrialization, SMEs, and all those other agencies, to share with Kenyans through Parliament. And even, in fact, the Constitution does not bar the CS from making a State of the Nation address on issues around cost of basic commodities. You know, there are mechanisms other than having a negotiation, other than having a dialogue, other than having a conversation. So I think some of these issues like cost of basic commodities, which Kenyans should not wait up to 1 month for some 14 gentlemen and 2 of them to receive a report and then announce to us that now this is what we are going to do about education. Does that mean that school kids should not go to school as they wait for the conversation to take place? I don't think so. Issues around audit of 2022 elections, I think, is critical, but not necessarily just hinged on issues around the server. Now, we have to find out a clear mechanism around 2 things. One, what does the Constitution say about access to information that is held by the state? And for the first time, I'm happy as an individual about this issue by Azimio, because government is being pushed to bring to life Article 35. So can we see it happening? election server is being held by the state and by extension an agency of state called IEBC. Can we see now government in its mechanism and nomenclature coming to also respond to citizens and say, enyewe, wafungulie, open the server. And then so what? Even if Azimio received that kind of, response and they're told, now we have opened the server against the Supreme Court petition and the processes, and, there was also part of the opening of the server was actually, a call which was made by the Supreme Court. Where does that leave us as a country? IEBC and reinstatement of the 4, I don't think that is a call which should even be made, because a process was put in place that was also constitutional, a tribunal by the president, and members had the opportunity to go and make their voices count. So what we need to talk about here, Jesse, in my view, is the ongoing process around replacement of commissioners. What are Azimio's cries? What are the issues with the process? And I think one of the issues that they have talked about is the over-concentration of the executive in the membership of both the panelists and the expectation that therefore they will have their likely possible followers within the IEBC Commission.
All right.
So that therefore needs to border down on the process. How do we do it? Is it the members? Because the political parties tribunal, which political parties liaison committee, which Azimio also has membership, is a mechanism for political parties to get into the panel. And there was a process of people to campaign and front their candidates. Did Azimio front a candidate? Did they campaign for their candidate? I think there are so many things that we need to talk about, not just because a dialogue is taking place, but because we are in the next phase of the electoral cycle. It has already started, because the IEBC gave us a post-election evaluation report. It had recommendations. So the bigger conversation needs to go into how do we build on the gaps that we already received and experiences. I don't think taking headlines will give us the results. I'm happy that the demonstrations have been recalled for at least 30 days. So we are hoping that that will be able to bolster this high-level political goodwill so that we see interests being put on the table and people are agreeing on what works, how it is going to work, and how we ensure that it is working, what does not work, and what we do with the things that also do not work. Because when demos are taking place, there are pros and cons. There are people who like it because, of course, it's informing our transformational progressive governance systems, but also there are other issues like police interferences, tear gassing people, and several things. We also need to look at how do we hold accountable the policemen who are actually being caught on live television cameras, shooting people and hauling tear gases there. So many things need to happen, Jesse, and I think we probably need to request you to help us have another conversation, even as the conversation is taking place within the bicameral parliament.
Okay, that's right. Anyway, Martins, you're a member of the Azimio Coalition Party. Talk to us about the messaging, because some might feel it's not too clear. We focused on the cost of living, or are we going back to the 2022 IEBC election servers and the Cherera 4, some of which who actually resigned willingly from office, and you're still pushing for them to be reinstated. Are we getting the messaging right at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think so. The first one, as you have just said, the living cost. Cindy tried to put it right, but it's a requirement for this talk. We want it to be done even before, because that is Kenya Kwanza issue. There was subsidies, and as I said earlier, you stabilize the patient first. They removed it, and they removed it from all quarters that used to make the life easy for Kenyans. We want that restored immediately, because Kenyans are suffering. The issue of election, I think that cannot be overstated. Election in this country, 2013, 2017, 2022, and all this, we want that to come to an end. The government spent a lot of money putting a system, including the server, to be fall back to when people are in doubt. And that's what we want the audit to be done and the server to be open. It is under the state, it's not in Azimio. We are just demanding the rights for Kenyans. When things go wrong, the way we feel they went wrong, what are the evidence? And if you are in that seat, which we call illegal, and you want to be legitimate, actually you should run with the key. Tell IBC, open this thing, let's see. So that one is very clear to us. The other one, which should be a subject of national discussion, we are a political multi-party democracy in this country. That simply means that if you have an agenda, sell it to the people, sell it to the parties, so that they can buy it. Even in parliament, if you bring good things, we are not mad people. We will vote for it. But don't go poaching for members of parliament. Don't poach political parties into your side. That is corruption. So we want to protect our democracy by protecting MP. If you are you're elected under Jubilee and you are in a Azimio coalition, stay there until the end of it. If you want to get out, there's a system. Resign so that you can seek fresh mandate. But what we are seeing now, immediately, people were bought in and they decamped. And yet they still have a badge, they still have a jersey on their shoulders saying Azimio. So you think Azimio is the other side. That political conmanship is not good for our country.
Okay.
And it's not good for our maturity. So the message is very clear. It's only that when you have a clear message, somebody would like to cloud it up. And that is what is happening the other side. But we are very clear. We have set the agenda. What we said, which is ultimatum, is agenda on the table. You cannot just have a discussion which is timeless. We have put the time there, 30 days.
Yeah.
Let's Kenya move on, we finish. But I want to correct Osindo a little bit because demonstrations are not all for 30 days. Demonstration depends on the sincerity of this guy. We can go to the street anytime, which is our right, actually. We are not begging anybody.
Right. Okay. And you're still insisting on expanding the talks beyond parliament. Is it still on the table?
You know why it should be out of parliament?
Why is that?
Even the previous ones, they were outside. Parliament now deal with amendments and motions, they vote on. But as it is now, parliament is biased towards the administration. So anything you bring, if there's no goodwill, they will be told how to vote. It is it's a meaningless process. And because what we have talked about affects so many people, we are running away from proper representation only. Back to Article 1, Kyoko, that people might also have a say from different constituencies. Okay. The religious leaders, the workers, and all this. Now, whatever they have put together will now come to the assembly because it would have been agreed, which is a destruction of that partisanship which we have now. Right. But if you subject it to this whole, it's useless. It's a futile business in futile.
Okay, so Kyoko, as you give us your final say on this, and he's brought about consumption and production subsidies, how they're insisting on, the bei ya unga ikurudi 100. And I think the president spoke about it on Labor Day. You now have unga ya 150, ya 200, according to him. You have the freedom of choice. And we had from Azimio actually posing questions on hiyo unga ya 150, perhaps near GMO. Of course, we haven't heard from KEBS, who will definitely have the final say. But what do you make of this particular talks? Is it a matter of not just if, but when they go back to the streets? Because many might think this is just buying time. What do you make of it?
First, the talks are important.
Yeah. The
talks are important. But by and large, Sido here has given a breakdown of the issues raised. 3/4 of those issues raised by Azimio are non-starters. They have alternative avenues of dealing with those issues. Parliament is the avenue. Even this conversation, Mheshimiwa is saying, that bring in non-parliamentarian insight. There's a concept called public participation. Once the leadership has agreed, take it to public participation. Call people to come and air views on it. So there are non-issues in truthfulness. However, it is not in the interest, and this I truly believe, it is not in the interest of Azimio for these conversations to end in 30 days. Because when it ends in 30 days, what next? What next? The reason Azimio has kept the government in check is because of these issues. If you resolve them systematically, what Kevin has said, let this cost of living, this subsidy, take it to parliament, bring alternative views into getting it. The question of subsidies, they were subsidizing consumption. If subsidy was a good issue, Uhuru brought it 6 months to the election or 1 year to the election. then Azimio should have been elected. If the subsidies were working as a program, then people would have seen it's a good thing and voted for Uhuru's candidate, which was Azimio. But because they were not working, the effect on the masses was negative. So the subsidy thing, you can't impose it on a new administration that has data and information that says the subsidies didn't work. You cannot impose it. So that's an issue. Again, cost of living, it has been stated. The question of server. Mheshimiwa says the one who has the key to the server is the presidency. The 2017 server, the one, if you take that logic that way, then the person who had the key to the 2017 server is the candidate who was supporting Raila. He had the servers then. You know, if you take this conversation logically to what it means, if he was the owner of the servers of 2017, I don't think the servers of 2022 changed. Go back there and look for them. But again, non-issue. Nobody wants to resolve the issues that are on the table. What is there is that this is a political game. I do not see, I foresee a situation where a new issue will crop up in the next 2 weeks.
Though, Mr. Kyoko, the servers changed, even the contractors changed.
Okay. I'm just saying that I do not see the need to resolve the issues because it removes the political oomph from Azimio. It is when there is this conflict, Raila is relevant, Kalonzo is relevant, Martha Karua is relevant, Kioni is relevant. If you resolve IEBC commissioners today, let me bring this to the table. Let me put it on the table. In the elections of 1997, 2000, and the issue of IEBC was normally an issue that was brought 1 year to the election, so that you carry it as you move to the election. Referee ni muongo, let us bring a new referee. If you bring it now, 4 years to the election, in 2031, what will be the issue to galvanize Kenyans around?
Okay.
As a strategy.
All right.
So I do not think it is in Azimio's interest to conclude these conversations in 30 days. I think there will be roadblocks. This thing will keep dragging because the moment it is resolved, especially the IEBC, which to me is about the future. And when you talk about IEBC, we are not talking about IEBC of 2022. People are talking, and I believe the conversation is about 2032. Right. How do we institute an independent electoral commission that one is one, loser is loser, winner is winner? It's futuristic, not...
we need final comments around the table. Our time is almost up. Martins, I can see a burning issue.
I like listening to Kyoko, but sometimes I don't get where he's coming from.
I'm happy you haven't said he's a Kenya Kwanza stood today.
No, I spare him for that.
Let's not attack his character. Stick to facts, yeah.
Because now, you can't say if we get it done in 30 days, then we have nothing to do. You know, Azimio are very patriotic. We want this thing get done, you know, so that we can. And the issue of IEBC, it takes democracy takes time. And until we get our election right, we are not going to tire. It takes time, and I urge Kenyans not to tire. It takes time. Even the mature democracies, they still have their own nitty-gritty thing. But yes, we had those four guys, the Serera 4. They didn't just volunteer to, you know, they were coerced. Yeah, they went through that time. And we don't want that to happen.
Okay.
Where if you are 7 commissioners and 4 says no, and you still just go ahead with 3 because you have a chair. That's not democratic. That's what we are saying. And it is not democratic, Kyoko. It is not. That's a rotten referee. If 2 linesmen says no, and the referee insists.
Okay.
And those guys, what do we call them? Those who view the whole thing.
VAR.
The VAR is also saying no. Now, you say because you are the referee, that is what you are saying is not right.
Okay.
But let me also finalize with this. The subsidy, you know, I'm a member of parliament. I know when fuel was fuel, when electricity was electricity because of subsidies. And now we are talking of production. Production depends on people. You cannot produce with people who are dead and sick. So subsidy worked. And I want to dispel the notion of my friend Kioko that people did not vote because of subsidy failed. We got more votes in Mount Kenya. It's only that they were stolen.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
that stealing is what we
I wish you could prove it, but anyway, time will tell.
I'll come with the evidence.
Jesse, I made a remark, and my friend Mheshimiwa Chege Mwaura, MCA Fongara, is reminding me that actually the cry by MCAs is that there is double taxation on the car grant. For instance, they have not been given money for loans, but you are paid transport refund. And so the car is bought, it's taxed at that level, and even the car grant, I mean the reimbursement for transport is also taxed. So that's what they're talking about. So he's asked me to clarify that so that it is clear.
Noted.
But I wanted to move this further and say that even as we engage with county governments, I think there is a very important need for us to build the capacity of members of county assemblies or anyone who is getting into any level of public service so that we deal with their expectations.
Okay.
Yeah, if we fail to do that, then I think we will be failing to instill that spirit of patriotism. So people will be desiring to be MCAs or MPs or governors or senators just for what they can get other than for the sake of service delivery. Lastly, I'm appealing to the President and the former Prime Minister that Kenyans are looking forward to you for a very stable country, and we want to pray that you'll be able to give us peace and that government will do its work by giving us an ample environment to govern and also to do business, and that peace is going to prevail. For things that have been erroneously done, for example, police tear gassing, I want to call upon agencies like IPOA and others to hold police officers accountable. On elections, I agree with Azimio on a number of issues, particularly when it comes to electoral reforms. And Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga has been very, very helpful to this country. A number of positive reforms that we have seen or experienced have been largely based on his, I would call it personal efforts, because he raises an issue and he really fights for it.
Yeah.
So we have to expand this conversation to also bring in even the development partners who support electoral reforms.
Right.
For example, purchase of BVR kits is not small money. But what do you do as a partner who invests in a system which is now being put to question? We want to hear their voices and also levels of investments against the practice of what is happening in the country.
Well noted.
Thank you so much.
Kyoko.
And thank you for the opportunity.
No problem.
Thank you, Jesse. I mean, first, the question of electoral reforms needs to be broadened from individuals. In that, when you look at the clarion calls that have been called in, when you talk about electoral reform is changing IEBC personnel, the commissioners. We've changed commissioners. It has not worked. Or it has worked, but one player has not been satisfied with the outcome. So there's need for a conversation. What is this reform we're asking about? Has it been achieved? Is it there? And is there a situation where somebody who loses needs to accept that I've lost? Because that's ultimately is all about it. In this, any other things, is allegation, innuendos, we had our votes, they were stolen, you were told to take that evidence in court, you didn't take it to court, or you took what was substandard and wrote here, then finally a whistleblower emerges from anywhere, a matter that has been litigated and is over. What you do is that you hold back the country from gains that have been made. I'm not saying the election is 100% perfect. The election could have been 80% perfect, but it is a positive step. Let us pick on the gains and move to consolidate or deal with the gaps that exist. We are a beautiful nation. Our democracy is vibrant. Don't ban this country. Don't ban this country. Nobody is bigger than Kenya.
I think that's a proper note to end it. I'm pretty sure there's... Thank you, Mheshimiwa. Peace. It's called friendly fire. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and your input right here. Definitely given value to our audiences back at home. I hope you get to start your weekend in style, and to each and every one of you, all the best as well, even as Mheshimiwa travels back home. My name is Jesse Rogers. Thank you so much for watching Morning Prime. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good morning.
Thank you.